So have you ever looked at the standard money advice?
Mm.
You know, go to school, find a good job, save up, and thought, is that really the whole picture?
Yeah, it's a common feeling, I think. That traditional path, it sounds safe, right? But does it actually lead to, well, serious wealth for most people?
Or is there maybe something else? Some other way of thinking that maybe only a few people really grasp?
It definitely makes you curious. The usual advice is everywhere, but like you said, the results often don't quite match the promise, especially when you look at real wealth building.
Exactly. And that's really why we wanted to do this deep dive today. We've been looking at these excerpts from a pretty popular interview. It's with Robert Kiyosaki.
Right, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad author?
Yeah, him. And he shares some, well, let's say, unconventional ideas he says he learned from his rich dad.
And our goal here, just to be clear, is to unpack those specific ideas from that interview. We're going to walk through what the source material actually says.
Identify the main takeaways.
And just try to understand this particular viewpoint on money, assets, debt, mindset, all based only on what's in these interview excerpts.
We're not here to say if it's right or wrong, just exploring what he presented.
Exactly, just laying out the perspective.
Okay, so let's get into it. One of the first big things the source hits on is this idea that, well, the usual system school, the standard financial advice, they just don't teach what the rich supposedly know about money.
That's a central theme, yeah. And he takes it a step further. The source suggests it's maybe not just an oversight.
Oh, how so?
Well, the perspective presented is that it might actually be part of keeping the poor and middle class focused on working hard for a paycheck, within the existing structure.
Instead of teaching them how to maybe build wealth outside of that structure.
Precisely. That's the argument. And this connects to something pretty controversial he brings up, fake money.
Fake money. Okay, tell me more.
He ties it back to 1971, Nixon taking the U.S. dollar off the gold standard.
Ah, okay. I remember hearing about that.
Right. So according to the source, before 71, the dollar was backed by gold. After that, it became, well, essentially based on debt, a fiat currency.
Meaning its value isn't tied to something physical, just trust, and it can be printed.
Exactly. And the source's point is, this fundamentally changed money. It can be created, often through borrowing, hence the connection to debt.
So the takeaway the source wants us to have is, if money is now this debt-based thing that can be printed,
then maybe the old advice, work hard, save diligently, maybe it doesn't make as much sense anymore.
like why save something that can just be printed faster than you can save it, potentially losing value?
That's the provocative question the source raises. It makes you reconsider the whole idea of saving cash, especially long-term in that specific context.
And he argues that our education system subtly kind of trains us to be good workers within that system.
Yeah, to be employees and savers, rather than teaching us how the system itself actually works or how to maybe leverage it.
Which leads to his idea about finding different teachers, right? Not the fake teachers, as he puts it, but people with real-world inside knowledge.
People who've actually done it, basically. Seeking practical financial education, not just theory.
Okay, so if just working for a paycheck isn't the main focus for the rich, according to this source,
Yeah.
what is the core principle?
Well, the big one, the phrase everyone knows, is deceptively simple. The rich don't work for money.
Okay, yeah, heard that one. But it sounds backwards, doesn't it?
It does. And the source shares a story about being asked to work for free, specifically to learn.
Work for free. Why? What's the logic there, according to him?
The claim is, when you get paid a wage, your brain kind of shifts focus. It locks onto the paycheck.
Like you become an employee in your thinking.
Exactly. You stop looking for the deeper lessons, the ways to build systems that generate money without you trading time for it.
Yeah.
Working for free, in that learning context he describes, forces you to find other kinds of value.
So it's about learning how money is made rather than just earning it directly.
That's the idea presented. It's like that old saying, give a man a fish.
Teach them how to fish.
Okay. Right.
Applied to money. Teach people how to build the money-making systems.
Precisely. And that flows right into a really critical distinction the source makes. Assets versus liabilities, but defined purely by cash flow.
Okay, this seems important. How does he define them?
Super simple, according to the source. An asset puts cash into your pocket, period.
And a liability.
Takes cash out of your pocket.
That's it. Just the direction of the money flow.
Yep. He says cash flow is the verb. It's about what the thing does with money regarding your finances.
So his example.
Yeah.
Your own house. Most people think of that as an asset.
Right. But according to this cash flow definition, he'd call it a liability. Because the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the repairs, that all takes money out of your pocket each month.
Okay. Whereas something like a rental property.
That's an asset if the rent coming in is more than the expenses going out. It puts cash in your pocket. He mentions owning thousands of them as examples.
So it's purely about net cash flow. That's a very different definition than usual.
It is, and it's absolutely fundamental to the whole perspective laid out in the source material.
Okay. Now, how do taxes fit into this picture?
Right.
He brings them up too, right?
Oh, definitely. He claims taxes are often people's single biggest expense, bigger than anything else, but they don't really think about managing it strategically.
And this ties into different kinds of income.
Exactly. The source breaks it down into 3 types. There's earned income. That's your paycheck from a job.
Got it.
Then portfolio income, like selling stocks for a profit, capital gains.
Okay.
And finally, passive income. That's the cash flow from assets like rent or business profits you don't actively work day to day for.
And the key point the source makes is these are taxed differently.
Very differently, often. Passive income, according to the source, frequently gets much more favorable tax treatment than earned income.
So the rich, in his view, focus on getting assets that produce passive income.
Which then allows them to legally structure things to pay less tax overall compared to someone earning the same amount through a salary.
He uses examples like McDonald's, right? Saying they're really in real estate.
Yeah, that's one example given. The idea is they buy the corner lot, which is prime real estate, an asset, and then they sell hamburgers. The structure helps with taxes.
And he mentions people like Jeff Bezos, saying they legally pay low taxes on huge wealth.
Right. Again, the claim is it's about leveraging the system, using assets, and the tax code the way it's written, which leads to another big idea.
Let me guess. Debt.
You got it. Using debt as money. This is another really counterintuitive one for most people.
How does that work? Banks usually want you out of debt.
Well, according to the source, banks are actually very willing to lend huge amounts of money, sometimes tax-free if you have assets.
Assets that generate cash flow, presumably.
Exactly. He gives his own example of getting hundreds of millions after the 2008 crash because the debt was secured by assets. The cash flow covers the debt payments.
While the average person without those kinds of assets might struggle even for a small loan, maybe because of credit scores or just not knowing how.
That's the contrast he draws. He argues that schools don't teach you how to use debt effectively, how to get good debt that buys assets.
And the source argues the government actually wants you to borrow for certain things.
Yeah, through tax breaks for things like buying property or starting businesses,
Right.
things that, create housing or jobs. The source's view is that using debt this way is a tool available to everyone, but you need the financial education to use it right.
Okay, so we've covered the mechanics, assets, liabilities, taxes, debt, but there's a whole other side to this, isn't there? The mindset piece.
Oh, absolutely huge. The source argues pretty strongly that poverty isn't just about lack of money, it's more a way of thinking, an attitude.
Not genetic, but a mindset.
That's the claim. And he offers a really powerful shift. He says, stop saying the words, I can't afford it.
Just stop saying it. What do you say instead?
Ask a question. How can I afford that? Or even just, how can I?
How can I? Instead of I can't. That feels different.
It really does. The source frames it as opening your mind. Instead of shutting down possibilities with I can't, the question how can I forces your brain to start looking for solutions, for ways to make it happen.
Viewing things as potential investments, maybe, in learning or assets.
Exactly. And he talks about facing rejection himself,
Yeah.
Banks saying no, even his wife questioning him early on.
Yeah, and he used that.
As fuel, as
Yeah.
motivation. Every no was apparently a reason to learn more, to figure out how to get to a yes. It's about seeing obstacles as problems to be solved.
He also says something like words become flesh.
Yeah, the idea that what you say, especially to yourself, shapes your reality. Your internal dialogue creates your world, in a sense. If you constantly say, I'm broke or I can't, then, well,
Hell, it will be.
that's the implication. He also really emphasizes learning from mistakes. Failure isn't bad, it's how you get smarter.
Intelligence increases through errors.
That's the perspective. You try something, it doesn't work, you learn, you adjust, you get smarter. Don't be afraid to mess up.
And this ties back to the idea that you don't necessarily need money to start making money.
Right. He explicitly says that. Real wealth comes from the knowledge, the financial intelligence. Knowing how to create systems that generate money is more important than having a pile of cash to begin with.
It's about the know-how, not just the starting capital.
Exactly. And he mentions that sometimes hitting a low point, a tough time, that's when you get the message, the insight you need to change course.
So the core of this mindset section is really about choice, choosing your perspective, your language, refusing to accept limitations.
Yeah, it's presented as something you actively control.
Hmm.
You can choose not to participate in that I can't mindset, regardless of your current situation. Focus on learning, focus on solving the how.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this deep dive. We've looked at the source's critique of standard financial thinking.
Why he thinks it might keep people stuck, and how that 1971 currency shift plays into his view.
We unpacked the key principles presented. The whole rich don't work for money idea, focusing on assets.
Defining assets and liabilities strictly by cash flow, understanding taxes, and that controversial idea of using debt strategically, all based on the source material provided.
And then we just covered the mindset part, ditching I can't afford it for how can I? Learning from mistakes, the power of your words.
Right. It's really a whole different framework for thinking about money, work, and wealth building presented in these excerpts. It definitely challenges a lot of common assumptions.
It really does. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening based on all this.
What's one belief you hold about money? Maybe something you've always just accepted? That these ideas might make you question.
Yeah, like is there I can't hiding in your thoughts somewhere? And what might happen if you just tried changing that phrase, asking how can I instead? How might that shift your perspective, even just a little bit, starting today?
It's definitely food for thought. Are you focused only on your paycheck, or are you also thinking about how to learn, how to maybe acquire things that bring money to you, worth pondering?